Lisa, thank you so much for joining us here and talking with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so let's get right into it. So what is your stance on New York State Prop 1, and what would you tell people who are on the fence about the proposition?
I am so glad that you're asking that, because that's something that everyone needs to understand. So when we create laws, we try to be very specific about the language so everybody knows what's entailed in it. But if we make a mistake, we can always quickly change that. This is not going to be a law. It's going to be in our Constitution. So once something's in our Constitution, it is there for a very long time. Very rarely do you ever make an amendment to one. So you got to be very specific about what it is. And I respect people's voice, and I want them to know what's actually in it. So let me explain to you how I think that people might understand it best. If I were to invite you to a birthday party and say, hey, want to go to a birthday party? What are some of the things you would like to know? You tell me. If somebody invited you, wouldn't you want to know where it is, when it is, who it's for, before you can RSVP? And that's the problem that I have with this prop. Because the prop mentions a lot of great words. It mentions about national origin, age, and so forth. But it doesn't give any scope around it. We don't know what it's actually talking about. And that could have disastrous outcomes. And if these are disastrous outcomes, and I don't care which side of the fence you're on, because it's the people's voice, if it's not what you're expecting, we're going to be stuck with that for a long time, just like New Mexico was when they forgot to go ahead and give a scope around the word gender. People thought it meant one thing. Now it's being fought in court. They say it may take generations before they figure it out. In the meantime, it's jeopardizing everybody's rights. So for example, they mention pregnancy outcomes. Nowhere on this do they ever mention the word abortion. So we already have abortion codified in New York State. And throughout that law, you see the word abortion, abortion, abortion. This doesn't use the word abortion, not even once. It says pregnancy outcomes. Two totally different things. Then it mentions things such as age and gender and national origin. Under what are we talking about? So I would love to see where this is taken back to the drawing board, where we can quickly go ahead and say, look, when we're talking about this, this is what we're talking about. Here's the parameters. So everybody who votes for it has confidence that they understand what this is actually about, rather than just hoping that they're right and possibly losing all of the rights and protections that we fought for all throughout the years. So I'm somebody who really wants to make sure that we understand things before we get stuck in a situation we can't get out of for a very long time.
All right. And next question, what is the top issue affecting the 123rd Assembly District?
These are great questions from your audience. I love this. Okay, so I think the number one issue is about the economy. And I'm a former economics teacher and somebody who has been in government that has helped communities to thrive. So I remember when this area used to be called the Valley of Opportunity. We used to be called also the most progressive county in all of New York State. Downstate could not keep up with us. We were thriving and very safe. So in the past 20 years, things have changed. So we've become the second highest poverty rate in all of New York State for our county. Our homeless rate has increased by 50%. The graduates from our college, we have some of the most brilliant minds, yet our unemployment rate for our graduates is 4 times higher than the national average. You know, we have taxes that are suffocating, we have all these regulations that are killing businesses, so we're going in the wrong direction. So how do we go in the right direction? That's the important part. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get a hold of our government. It's become too expansive and too expensive. We have to start making the government accountable to us. Because when you think about it, we are the employers. The people in elected office are the employees. They're supposed to be our voice. And we go ahead and give them our jobs through our vote. We can also kick them out of the jobs because of our vote. So how do we go ahead and make them accountable? First of all, we have a lot of transparency. We don't want where they're allowed to give themselves 29% pay raises like they've done in the past. That doesn't help anyone. That money could have gone to programs and services we need. And that's the big problem here. They're looking at their wants, and it's excessive wants, rather than looking at the needs that the people need. We have so little in programs and services, including mental health and substance abuse, that we actually need here. And we're instead spending on things like the pay raises. They also have where they ushered in this year that if you're running for elected office, collectively, we would be getting millions of dollars to run our campaigns. So for example, with my position alone, candidates are allowed to get up to $175,000 of taxpayer dollars. So think of it this way, there's 150 assembly seats times 2 people, so 300 times $175,000. That's a lot of money that could be going to the people, not to go ahead and give us one extra flyer that we could send to people or one extra commercial. If you're running for Senate, it's double that. By the time you get up to governor, it's $3.5 million per candidate. That is a waste of money. We have to start being accountable for the people. The second part of making our economy grow is we have all of these roads, and so many people are leaving out of here in droves to them. They are going up to Rochester for the MedTech hub, or up to Syracuse for the manufacturing hub, or they go downstate for the financial hub. But we've forgotten that we are at the focal point. We're right in the center. The roads are supposed to come to us so we can build this hub again and be prosperous. And when we're doing that, we're also helping the trades, because now you need the people to build the buildings, the electrical, the plumbing. You need the people for the roads and so forth. So we're employing a lot of people. When we're employing a lot of people, we're helping out the small businesses, because now we can spend the money on the goods and services they do. So now the small businesses are thriving. And when everybody is thriving, then we could go ahead and spend the money on the not-for-profits and the arts. And the arts are critically important. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Lula is recognized as one of the top 10 attractions throughout the whole United States. California, they really promote it. That brings people in here. When we're bringing in new people, we're creating jobs for them. The real estate market goes up, everybody goes ahead and they prosper from that. So that, I believe, is the number one question that as I go door to door I keep hearing. You know, they don't want to just hear about where are we now or where were we before. They want to know what is the path to the future, and that's the path that I see.
All right. And how will you ensure the state provides resources needed for local municipalities to support housing concerns?
Great question. I love these questions. So, you know, again, we have to start making people accountable, because in government, they've just been wasting their money. A lot of other states actually use this program, and what they do with that is they find duplications. So you never look at, let's eliminate a job, because jobs add to the economy. So this software, you can go ahead and pick different filters. You never pick where you're going to eliminate a job. But what they do is they find that there's duplication on checks going to places, and so you get rid of that. They find where it will say things like 29% pay raise. Really, the cost of living is what most people get. They don't get 29%. And by the way, we are the highest paid state legislature in the nation. Nobody gets close to us at all. So these are all ways we have to go ahead and reel that in, and we have to make sure we have affordable housing for everyone. That's been a concern from the students on up to the elderly. I know that the seniors are paying money that they can't afford to live in different facilities. I've talked to some that have told me that they pay $4,000 to $8,000 every single month on top of having to buy their little apartment or cottage. And they say, you know, the only reason I can afford that is because I don't expect to live long by the time I do that. And that is a horrible way to treat our people. We have the students who also need affordable housing, because when we build this economy, we need places where they can live, you know, places where they can set roots. And when you have a home, a place that you can call your own, you have more of a vested interest in a place. You feel more permanent, and you know that you have more value. So we have to go ahead, take away from the waste, put it to that type of need. There's so many other needs besides housing too, but I'm glad that you asked that question.
Absolutely. And what steps must be taken to ensure people have access to mental health resources?
Okay, so I get tired of saying great questions, but I love these questions, because these are the same things I hear over and over again. And you know, when it comes to mental health, I know that during the Cuomo administration, we had shut down a lot of mental health facilities. And I talk to people who say that there's a long waiting list in order to get help. That doesn't help us at all, because basically if everybody in the community doesn't thrive, then nobody does. And we have a lot of people who really desperately need these resources. Again, getting rid of the waste, putting it toward the services that we need. There used to be a program a long time ago called CETA. And what they went ahead and did was they made sure that anybody who didn't get their GED, somebody who wasn't prospering in life, they hooked up with different companies and they had them act like mentors. You know, get them into a job that you know that they might do well on. Basically, you're mentoring them, helping them with that. They get pride in themselves, and at the same time, they have to, on the other end, complete different things. We had the mental health resources for them. We had the tutors for them. We went ahead and made sure that they thrived from all different angles. And that's something that's very important. You know, I've talked to different police stations who said, you know, there's all these different groups like AA and NA and so forth. They said, how come the government can't go ahead and allocate some type of money where people act like a sponsor? So if somebody is starting to feel like, you know what, I may slip back into this, that they could go ahead and and reach out to their mentors and make sure that they're going to be okay. Because we put all of this burden on all these not-for-profits, we are not stepping up to the plate anymore, and that is wrong.
Gotcha. And the recreational cannabis industry in New York State continues to grow. What do you think needs to be done to ensure the recreational cannabis industry can grow responsibly?
Okay, so there's been a number of problems with that industry, and even my opponent had mentioned it when she was on another show. So basically, when we rolled this out, we didn't learn anything from California. California had mentioned all the different problems. The fact that they had promised farmers certain things, it didn't happen. The fact that they thought it would make things safer and more legal, it didn't happen because they didn't take the right steps. So by the time we had ushered this in, all these reports were out, and we didn't learn from it. We didn't listen to it about how much water that it takes and so forth. The other thing that I've heard from people in that industry is they said, do you know how much money we pay for a license? So they go ahead and it's about $35,000. And they said the more licenses that you try, the better chance that you have. But unlike other industries where if you don't get it, you get most of your money back except for the processing fee, our state goes ahead and keeps this money. So they said that they feel like it's kind of almost like a bait and switch type of thing. And I hate to use that phrase, but I heard it from a few of them. They said, I feel like, I'm convinced to go ahead and try more than once, so I'm giving up all this money, and if I'm not selected, I'm out of all that money. Well, that's not how we grow businesses. When we grow businesses, we have to be accountable to everyone. And so we have to look at the farmers, we have to look at the small business people, and we have to see where there's a need and where there's going to be problems.
Gotcha, absolutely. And New York State's bail reform laws remain controversial nearly 5 years after its passing. Do you think Albany needs to revisit bail reform laws, and if so, why?
Actually, they've revisited it a few times. Within the first 2 years that they had it, they changed it 4 times because they knew the different problems that were with it. So they had started off by saying, we need to do this because there's an overcrowding in our jails and our prisons. And they said that that actually interferes with our 8th Amendment that says you cannot do cruel and unusual punishment. Absolutely, you cannot. We have to make sure, again, that everybody's taken care of. So they said that, but then now they're going ahead and saying we're closing all these jails because they're empty. So which way is it? What was the reason really behind this? So when I did a lot of research, the people who have been benefiting from this are the people who have committed crimes. For example, there was a gentleman by the name of Isaac Rodriguez. By the time he went for his first trial, he had already committed 55 more crimes, leaving one person for dead after he robbed him with his gang. So we're allowing people to go ahead and victimize more people all the time. That doesn't make anybody safe at all. When you come up with legislation, you have to make sure that it's something that's responsible and makes people safe. Yet I don't really get the feeling that anybody is actually talking to law enforcement and asking them what they think is best. And we're putting them at risk with this all the time, and that's not fair. And part of the bail reform and also the soft on crime legislation is something that a lot of people don't talk about, which is something that I'm going to go ahead and work against. So it was introduced saying that if somebody sees, I'll give me as an example, if somebody sees me being just beaten up and they start stabbing me and so forth, they call the police. The police come and they arrest the guy is ticketed and he's released. Now let's pretend that you're the witness. So you're the one who would call the police. So now the person is free, and 35 days after he's released, so months and months and months before his trial, he is given the names and home addresses of every single witness. So now he knows where you live. He knows to you it's not a case of allegedly he did this. He knows you saw that. So he knows you stand between him possibly going to jail and walking free. That doesn't make the people who are witnesses safe. And on top of that, he can get into my house and go ahead and ask me questions under the guise that it helps him to go ahead and refresh his mind on what happened. Well, now you're making a victim out of somebody twice. And then on top of it, he could technically ask for the police officer's address if the police officer is the one who witnesses it. Our police officers risk their lives every single day. And, I can't thank them enough for what they do. Now we're asking them to put their families at risk as well. That's not acceptable in my book.
And small businesses and residents are struggling under the strains of inflation. What is your plan to combat inflation?
Yes, they are. Everybody is suffering, and especially the small business. You know, I had a lot of hope last year when they came up with some ideas to help small businesses, and it was not passed. So in Albany, one of the ideas they came up with was a website, and this has been tried in other states. So the website would go ahead and promote all the different small businesses. They would all be linked into it. There would be all the keywords, and it would promote, and that way people from other areas would go ahead and be able to buy the products and bring it out. It's one more way to give them visibility and get them so they're prospering. We had decided not to do that. It's something that would have cost just pennies, basically, and we went against that. So if we want to go ahead and help the small businesses, we have to focus on them. And that's why I was mentioning things like, you know, increase the economy. When you increase the economy, you have more people who can go ahead and buy the goods and services from the small businesses. We also can't be burdening them with all of these regulations and these taxes. I talked to one business that is only a couple of blocks from the Pennsylvania border. And they said that there is a company exactly like them, just a couple of blocks away in Pennsylvania. That company does not have the regulations they do. So they said it's killing them. And they said, you know, when you own a small business, you have to have good service, a good product, and you have to be aware of your competitors. They said New York is not aware of our competitors, which means our bordering states. So we have to stop doing this to the companies. We have to bring down the taxes. We have to make things a lot easier for them. And again, when we get rid of the excessive waste that we're doing, we're going to be able to bring down the prices on things.
And flooding always remains a concern for the greater Binghamton area. What steps would you take to keep the community safe from flooding?
Okay, I know that a lot of areas have gone where you can only, you know, have a house within so many feet of water, where you have to go ahead and raise a house. They've been doing that from small towns up to big cities and so forth. But the other thing that we haven't done in a long time that other places do is we haven't dredged the water. You know, and you see it in your own driveway. The leaves fall, if they start to pile up, we go ahead and get rid of them. Could you imagine in our backyards if we weren't doing that? Our topsoil would keep going up higher and higher and higher. We're not doing that with our rivers. We need to do that. Once we go ahead and get rid of all of that sludge, all of the debris and so forth, we're going to go ahead and lower the levels again. And that will go ahead and help as well.
What is key to remaining bipartisan during a time of intense political discourse at the federal level?
Okay, so I like to only talk about the state level. So when I say this, what I say for the federal applies to the state as well. You know, George Washington once said that political parties would be the downfall of America because he thought the people would just stand on their own party and they wouldn't listen to each other. And he was absolutely right. You know, we have a lot of people who go ahead and they act like it's a football game and we're going to just cheer for our team. And I found that out when I had a magazine because what I did was I went ahead and I explained about different bills. I intentionally kept off who the sponsors and co-sponsors were. And then with the podcast, I would ask people if they loved it or not. And I made sure I had people from different parties. And when it was a great bill, the Republicans and Democrats both thought it was their party that introduced it. When I told them who it was, the other side would always be like, well, I changed my mind then, I don't like it anymore. So we unfortunately have that same mentality when it comes to those in elected office. That doesn't do any good. I think if you've seen anything that I've done, I refrain from going ahead and mentioning my opponent's name or trying to put a blame on one person because this is a whole system. We have to work for the community, not for our political parties, and then that's going to help out an awful lot. So when you look at bills, don't look at it's my party that's introducing it. You look at what is it that the people need? Because again, it's the people that you're responsible for. You're supposed to be their voice. I was in elected office once, and I did exactly that. And at that time, I was new to things, so I did not know that basically things are rehearsed before you go out. They tell you what to support and what to say. I'm not like that. I will never be like that. And I told them that because I'm a stand-up person. And what they did was after I went ahead and voted against something that they wanted me to vote for because I knew it hurt my district, I got reamed out really bad. And everybody heard it, which surprised them. They didn't know that people could hear it, but that's how loud things got. And I don't care because the bottom line is it's the people who elect me in office. They're the employer. And if everybody had that same mentality, we would go far. And you know, talking about that too, New York State, when we talk about upstate and downstate, they always say it's never going to matter with upstate because downstate has the numbers. Well, if we start looking at things as an upstate coalition, where it's not the party, but it's what helps upstate, we can make some tremendous progress.
And speaking of your prior experience, how will it, from representing the 15th district in Sanford, Connecticut, translate to representing the 123rd Assembly District?
So basically what I was mentioning, you know, one, I was a former economics teacher. So one of the first things I did when I got in elected office was I looked at all of the budget, and I went through things and I found a lot of duplication. And then with the duplication, when we were getting rid of it, I went ahead and said, you know, with this extra money, let's use it for this. For example, we had where we gave one not-for-profit, always gave them over $1 million. And so automatically that's what they wanted to do. But I had been looking at the budget and I was like, you know, they've got over $12 million in the account. I said, they don't need this extra million. They've got enough there. I said, but what we need is we need a rape crisis center. I said, where you have somebody who can speak English and Spanish. I said, we don't have something like that. When a woman is raped, it's hard enough, or a man, it's hard enough to go and tell somebody about it, because now you're reliving it again, and it's so difficult. Could you imagine going ahead and trying to do that when it's not somebody who speaks your language? And then on top of it, not even having those resources. So I went ahead and I really worked with the budget to find what it is that people need. And I went ahead and I reduced the waste, and I was able to get taxes down. So I'm going to do that again. And you know, when we talk about also the economy, and I was talking about building the economy, definitely have to look at the infrastructure too, because that's what I made sure of when I was there, because I knew that we could create jobs very quickly. But then you don't want the congestion that you might see down in Long Island, where everybody sits and it's basically like a parking lot. So you have to go ahead and construct the best ways to get around, and you have to talk about public transportation, different types of mass transportation, so it's not all one person, one car, because that doesn't help the environment and it doesn't help the flow.
All right, well, those are all the questions that we have for you today. Thank you once again for giving us your time and speaking with us.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.